civil society were unable to do their work. Indeed, that in many places, civil society workers were held in prison. You probably know about the case of Ethiopia that has dominated the news with the so-called Zone 9 bloggers. That's just one example. Another kind of law that has been adopted, and this is what I will describe as the new generation of the national security laws, are those related to surveillance and those related to intelligence. Just to give you one example, my country, France, has adopted over the last 6 months or so 2 laws, one on surveillance, one on intelligence, both of which have been criticized heavily by human rights activists and freedom of expression activists in particular because of their impact on freedom of expression. The second tool that has been used to curtail freedom of expression is what happened in the court. And here, unfortunately, the justice system has not been at the forefront of defending freedom of expression. In fact, what we have seen over the last few years is an increasing number of people being sent to prison, so criminalized, for their expression, some of which may be borderline, some of which may be actually bad, a lot of which are actually legitimate political expression. And for that, people are being put in prison, whether it's in Egypt, as I mentioned earlier, but also in Thailand and a number of other countries. There is a militarization of the criminal procedures that is taking place when it comes to freedom of expression, all of which is resulting in a majority of journalists being imprisoned right now on national security charges. Press freedom organizations that survey imprisonment of journalists have pointed out that the majority of those that are currently imprisoned are imprisoned on charges related to national security. And out of them, the largest number are online journalists. So the third tool that has been used by government has been an obsession over the online space and an attempt to curtail freedom of expression online through various measures, one of which is through putting increasing pressure on platforms, social media, and so on, to act as their proxy censors and to curtail and ban certain kind of expression outside usually court order. Another tool that has been used, which I think is going to be mentioned in that conference, is the penalization of whistleblowers. I'm not going to expand on it, but this is a very another avenue through which transparency, access to information is being curtailed in the name of national security. And finally, the fifth tool, which I wish to highlight, is the silencing, the crushing, or just the moving away of any kind of dissenting voices. I want to give you the example of counterterrorism, which is the one I have been followed very closely for more than a year now. And what has struck me in all of the meetings I've attended, whether they were public or private, is the fact that there is basically no debate. When you go to a meeting to talk about counterterrorism, people don't disagree. There is very little disagreement. What you have is a creation of some kind of consensus over very little, actually. The absence of debate over an issue that is so fundamental to society, to me, is one of the most scary aspects of what's happening right now in terms of freedom of expression. Alongside the construction of a so-called global alliance to fight counterterrorism, although every member of that global alliance has a different definition of who is a terrorist and what they are fighting against. So, peaceful dissents, secular, human rights activists, journalists have all become the focus of these counter-terrorist strategy. It's not necessarily the intended focus, at least in some cases. I will, however, question the extent to which it's not an intended focus for a number of countries. For others, it may just be what is usually referred to as an unintended outcome. So, The question I want to leave us with right now, in response to a monster, you can discuss it, whether it is one or not. We have not ourselves created another monster. And what it means for our fundamental rights and freedom of expression. I have 1 minute left, so I'm going to give you at least 1 or 2 more positive notes. The first is that today, one federal judge in the US, Gladys Kelsler, has ruled that the Guantanamo force-feeding videos must be released. And she criticized the executive branch for trying to become a law unto itself. That's a very positive move. There have been a few more like this. A court in Zimbabwe has ruled that defamation was unconstitutional and that there was other way of protecting reputation. In Norway, the appeal court a couple of weeks ago has said that nobody should risk criminal liability for expression based on inferred interpretation rather than explicit statement. And I just want to maybe give you one more thought, which is something that was said a number of years ago by Justice Douglas in a very well-known case in the US called Brandenburg versus Ohio. And he said, although the threats were often loud, they were always puny and made serious only by judges so wedded to the status quo that critical analysis made them nervous. Thank you very much.